Welcome to the WRW podcast, where we force each other to be well read and do research and have opinions. I'm Sammi.
I'm Angel.
I'm Sam.
I'm Abhi.
And I'm Devi.
This episode, we are going to talk about Yellowface by R.F. Kuang.
Yay!
So, how I know about R.F. Kuang is, so I used to be on this book club Discord server where like a lot of people at the same time they were reading this book. It's like her debut book called The Poppy War. And even I got on the hype train at that time because I wanted to make friends with the people there. Yeah, it was lockdown and I started reading it. I actually didn't really like the book, but it's a very important, interesting book. It's about the opium wars, the Sino-Japanese wars that happened, and it's like the protagonist very anti-hero, morally grey. It's really interesting, but it was very slow for me. It was hard for me to read. So there's like two more books which I didn't read. I just read the plot summaries and I was like, no, I'm not gonna read the other two books. But yeah, and I was really hesitant to start her second book called Babel, I don't know. Yeah.
I say Babel.
Babel?
It's like babbling,
Babel. It's like Babel.
I think pronunciation is fine so long as communication is achieved.
Yes. Okay. So this book also was like everyone were talking about it in the Discord server because they were very hyped for her second book. And like one thing that caught me when like the blurb came out is like the Babel does a lot of violent decolonization, which I was like, wow, interesting. And it does do some violent
I really want to read Babel.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
Please send us the EPUB.
Yeah, I will send you the EPUB. It's really great. I really love the book. It's a really good book. I just please read the book. I'm not gonna reveal anything. It has decolonization. It's violent. It has linguistics.
Is it a violent decolonization?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. But yeah, there's like a lot of language stuff going on, which as an English literature student who studied linguistics in the first sem, which was really interesting to me, and I could like connect it to the classes and stuff. Yeah. So when she started her promo for Yellowface, I was like also hooked because it's like a satire. It was like I was seeing the reviews of people who get the advanced reader copies, and she used to repost the reviews, and all of the reviews were like haunting. I read it in 4 hours. I did this, I did that, and I was like so. I wanted to read it right when it came out, and I did. I think I did read it right when it came out, and yeah, I also and it reminded me of this this article which we read in class called In Defense of Fiction by Zadie Smith, and I really wanted to talk about this book with my friends, so of course I sent them the EPUBs and it started a chain of reading.
Thanks for starting
And
that
then
chain.
we read it in 4 hours.
Yeah, actually.
I read it in 3 days.
Yes.
It took me 3 days though.
Yeah.
I win though.
Okay.
Honestly, fastest book I have read in a long time.
Yeah.
How many days did you take?
I think it was about 3 days.
3
but
days,
I was on vacation.
Yeah, and I also follow R.F. Kuang on Instagram. Her posts are really nice. Like she's like a scholar. She studies Chinese, studies contemporary Chinese language studies. It's really interesting to see her posts. And she also studied in Oxford, which Cambridge, Oxbridge thing, where like Babel. It's also set there. So
And I love that kind of like self-criticism. But we have lots to discuss in this episode.
yes. So, before we get into that, we have a special question from Abhi.
Thanks for the one clap.
Okay, 2 clap.
3 clap. 3, 4, 5,
6 clap.
7.
I feel like I'm in a kindergarten class.
Enough claps.
Okay, anyways. So today my weird question is related to...
Weird question? Isn't it special question?
Oh yeah, today my special question is related to food. Because of no particular reason. I think I'm hungry. But yeah. What food would you use to build a house?
What food would you use to
Yeah.
build a house?
Yeah.
That's such a weird question.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Dough.
Dough? Okay, Devi wants to go.
Is this based on the same universe where we were magically worms and we could
Yeah,
magically be
yes.
immortal and survive off the food
Magic realism.
and act as bait for the fish? The same like magical realism universe?
And Gretel
Okay.
vibes.
I guess like those frosted biscuits because I really wanted those. I don't know. I think I
But
saw
then
it
you
in
would
some.
eat them down, right?
Yeah, and I'll build them up again. Self-sufficiency. I just need someone to like provide me the sources. And assuming I'm in the worm universe, I'm a worm, and you said you could give me anything in that worm universe because you love me so much, you would provide me with the materials to keep on building my like self-sustaining house.
I didn't know you were a rapper.
Thank you, bars, right?
Bars and bars.
Sammi?
I don't know. I think I would. My immediate impulse to answer that question is define food, because I mean I guess number of genuine actual building materials can be digested by various organisms, and I would want a house
Okay, if you
that
were
I
a
don't
human.
have to rebuild.
If you were a human.
I am a human.
Like in this universe.
It has to be human edible. Human edible food. If it doesn't have to be human edible, then my
You eat.
okay, it needs to be a house that I am capable of eating. Then I will go. I would want my house first of all to be in a cold climate so it doesn't rot quickly, and then I'll make it out of ice. Igloo house.
Okay, brother. Ice.
Igloo. Igloo is edible. I don't want to build it again and again. I'm very lazy. And also, I don't like eating the same thing over and over again. I'll get tired of it. So I'll just live in an igloo and not eat it. Yeah.
Okay.
Angel does not answer. Okay.
said dough.
Angel said dough, but dough.
Bread or something.
But if it like rains, how will you?
Yeah, it will like have.
It'll collapse on your head, and then you'll have a sticky bread hat.
How nice of that. I will die.
No, you won't die, but you'll have to get it out of your head, which I think is a fate worse than death.
That's what I can die instead.
Sam, do you have a food item?
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna look into the logistics of building it and it sustaining it and staying there, but I think I would want a house of cake. Because
cake and cookies.
just cake.
Just okay.
Yeah, I know my house is made of like the
Would
frosted
the
so you guys
cake
match.
be house shaped and house looking from the outside,
Yes.
but only like secretly made out of cake?
No.
Oh, like I can't believe this is cake. You know that.
I don't really care. I just want it to be cake so that I can just go there and just take cake and eat the cake anytime I want. I can make different
I'm hungry. Let me eat my wall.
different
right now.
frostings, different flavors. So I'll just take it. I'll just take a chocolate and then I'll eat it. Take it, put it in a whipped cream, eat it. Yes. Yes. So.
Then I think then I have something.
Yeah. What do you?
Like chocolate house.
Yeah. You will
Chocolate
also be
would
in
melt
cold climate.
though.
Girly, as if cake will stay for a long time.
It will. It will. See, the thing is, I'm
My
saying.
igloo house will stay for a long time.
Igloo, I don't consider
Yes,
that
I
a
am
food.
the fifth little piggy.
Is it like girl dinner eating ice? That kind of thing?
I'm not eating this. Ami, what is your house?
Mine would probably be like toast because I've just been eating so much toast
You
these
are a
days.
toast girl.
I would toast it to like, it would just be like really burnt toast, really burnt, so it just like with holes and doesn't like fly off. But also, yeah, just toast, I feel like. Because then you can have lots of dips with it, especially chocolate. Okay, Angels is chocolate.
Wow,
Thanks.
it's just like the different schools of thought in some
Yeah, it is.
highly academic research.
Yes.
Okay, enough about food.
Yeah.
She sighs, takes a sip of tea. For some reason, I keep thinking about how good her English is. There's only a hint of an accent, and her vocabulary is rich, her sentence structures complex and varied. Athena had always made a big deal about how her parents had immigrated to the States without speaking a word of English, but Mrs. Liu's English sounds fine to me.
Yellowface follows the publishing career of struggling author Juniper Hayward after the death of her acquaintance, a successful author named Athena Liu. Juniper ends up in the possession of Athena's unpublished manuscript and decides to complete, edit, and publish it herself. Juniper becomes the white author of a detailed novel about Chinese soldiers in World War I. And Yellowface uses this situation to discuss issues of race and publishing. Kuang in this week creates her characters to act as material and direct representations of the issues that she wants to argue about. So to get us started off, I just wanted to dig into those main two characters, Juniper and Athena. What are your impressions of them? Abhi?
I was literally not going to speak in this episode, but I'm like still reading this book and everybody here has finished it. So first of all, I just don't like Juniper because she's so ew. Like, I don't like her. I don't like her. I don't know. I don't have much to say, but Athena, I feel like I see a lot of R.F. Kuang in Athena because she's also like Asian American. Is she? She is, yeah.
She is, yeah.
So she's Asian American and she's
She's
very
directly
like
Chinese American.
yeah. And Athena also in the book, she seems really like highly educated and goes to like a really went to like a really prestigious like institute, and also and R.F. Kuang also went to like what, Yale? Harvard?
Yale,
Yeah.
Cambridge.
Yeah, so she's like pretty smart, and I kind of thought of R.F. Kuang when they were like introducing Athena in the first chapter itself. And for Juniper, I mean, she's white and I don't really like her, so
Okay, starting this off on a very spicy note.
yeah. And she's like, I mean, she comes from a background of privilege, even though she's not, like very established in her writing career, but still I do feel like she's like inherently just going to be more privileged than Athena was. Okay, Sam?
Yeah. So, like, I know that June is set up to be, someone we hate, someone horrible, someone who's doing something. But at the same time, sometimes I saw, like, moments of relatableness with her loneliness. Like, like this hard publishing world, and she's just trying to do this. So I feel like she is a very interesting villain who's like human
Who is also the narrator.
narrator. Like, she's taking up like lots of roles and it's like really complex. I also felt like we all know that Juniper is like a racist in the book, right? But her racism also was stemming from her jealousy, right? Like, she was jealous, and I don't know. I particularly was very neutral about them. Like, for me, Athena, she didn't seem like a character. For me, like, she seemed like a ghost. I mean, yes, she is a ghost, but still, it was like a looming presence throughout the book near me. So, like, we are reading the book together. It was like that kind of thing. Yeah. Devi?
It's going to be so hard for me to provide a structured answer to this question because, man, I know I said that, oh my god, this episode is an impromptu one. We had not planned it. Sami was in class just like an hour back and she was scripting the questions. And I was like, wait, I don't think I'll be able to talk much about this because it's been like around a few weeks since I read it. But now I realize that, man, I do have a lot of thoughts.
It's a book that you can't help but have stuff to say.
Yeah, exactly. So Juniper, first of all, a very hateable character, and she's kind of like, built up to be this sort of caricature of this,
Tragic hero thing.
every single white victim woman thing, okay, who uses misogyny to overlook some of the other social factors that may, affect a person's life. Anyway, but what I really found interesting was that in some parts of the book, I could really empathize with Juniper. For instance, she's not cast as this like terrible villain who's out to get everyone, who's like, whose jealousy does not have like a solid basis. In some parts, I I really felt sad for her. For instance, Athena herself, okay, and here's my opinion about her relation to R.F. Kuang. I think in order to like read this book in its authentic self, we kind of need to separate the author from this character, because that's going to bias your reading of the book. I think on Twitter, I also saw that, she had denied that Athena was a self-insert. Let me just go back to June. Anyway, there's this...
To add on to that, like,
Yeah, sorry, Sam.
no, like how I saw like most of the reviews on like Goodreads and like YouTube, it's like they always bring in R.F. Kuang in relation to the book, like always. And
that
so
does...
similarity between Athena and R.F. Kuang, so it makes sense that a lot of people would actually...
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of online discourse about it, but I want to get your opinions about it out, Devi.
Yeah, at the same time, isn't it like kind of arrogant of us to presume that, this is what R.F. Kuang is. This character has like a few characteristics we think R.F. Kuang is like, like some life facts, but we don't know if R.F. Like, I don't think it's right to presume that, this is R.F. Kuang in the book, because she's a person of her own. Let me just finish this one point back to June. Another reason why it's dangerous to associate these two is because Athena herself has some antagonistic qualities in the book. So there's this sensitive part in the book. Trigger warning, because I'm going to bring up sexual assault. Juniper she thinks she gets raped when she's a freshman, and Athena is her friend, and she discloses it to her, and I think she's the only person she discloses it to, and it's obviously a very vulnerable moment. I think a few weeks or a month or months later, Athena wins an award for a short story. And when June reads it, she realizes that her words were taken from her and projected onto a different character, about her not being sure if she was really raped. And obviously this does not play into race. This does not play into the actual issues the book is talking about, Yellowface, but it's not a right thing to do for Athena, in my opinion, and I genuinely felt horrible for June in that moment. So my point is that I really like, even though June was built up to be this caricature, who's really funnily racist at points, she does have the fact that her jealousy has such a human-like basis to them makes the book much more haunting to me, because I was like, man, I kind of relate to June at some points, but not on the racist parts, guys, but on the jealousy and thing, oh my god, this person's so much more better than me, I need to get ahead, and it's unfair, and stuff like that. But yeah, this book slays. Angel?
Just like the Barbie episode, I always consume something without any thoughts. I don't even read the synopsis of a book. If I just read one line in some reel and I'm like, that's slay, I will start reading it. Just because, I read it because everyone was reading it, and I was like, I should also read it. Right? So I started reading the book without any thoughts. I even forgot that Athena died at it's revealed in the first itself. And I was spamming the group saying that Athena died as if it wasn't there on the... that literally reveals how thoughtless I am when I'm reading something. And so while I was reading, I did not villainize Juniper, or did I villainize Athena. I was like, okay, Juniper is this and Athena is that. And also, to me personally, even if it's a villain, right, but if they give that character a protagonist position, I have this sentiment for the character regardless if they're villain or not. I just like Devi mentioned, before, the scene where Athena takes words out of Juniper and writes her into a short story. I felt really, really bad for Juniper. And every time something bad is gonna happen, I would be I would close my phone and I would take a deep breath, and I'm like, I'm gonna read something that's something that I wouldn't like. I wouldn't want it to happen. Yeah. But although, it's fair for Juniper to, because she, if you, kind of, it's there out in it's not a spoiler, right?
It's not a spoiler.
It's
I
not.
mean, we will be spoiling the book anyway, so like, please.
Juniper takes Athena's work, like the last work she wrote before she died, and writes it into her own story, right? Even at that time, I always said, this should not be revealed, this should not be revealed, because I have this sentiment for the protagonists, regardless of how horrible they are. I just don't want the story to turn out as something that is, bad for the protagonist. So yeah, that's why I don't really have like specific thoughts on both the characters. I just went thoughtless while reading it, and I did like take some, I highlighted certain parts which I really liked, where Juniper talks about writing in like detail at some point. Sam, do you have something to say?
Yeah. So another thing which I felt relatable to like Juniper is that like her approach with writing. Like I read that, so there's this line so where I'll read it out. So the wildest thing about all this is that even now I cannot stop composing. I'm trying to funnel this awfulness into something lovely. So it's like I felt relatable, because even I, like whatever, even if it's like some horrible something happening, even I still try to put it into words, make something out of it. That's what she's doing, right? She's taking everything, whatever is happening, she's like trying to make something out of it.
And her love for writing is very
authentic.
And
really. So it's like she's really, really complex, and
like we don't know if we should hate her or if we should like her. Like I'm in the middle. I don't know if I hate her.
Just let it be known, I hate her, but I feel sympathy towards her.
Like I hate the parts where she's racist and she's a bit awful at so many times, but I also sympathize with her, So I'm like in this place where I don't hate her, nor do I like her. Yeah. It's just somewhere in the middle.
But like she gets really worse towards the end. Like really worse. So yeah, Abhi.
I already spoke, but still, Devi mentioned something about separating R.F. Kuang from Athena, and I was going to say something. Wait. Okay, so somebody who's like just reading it, like initially, obviously it's like not fair to like mix up those characters, because R.F. Kuang is like a real person, and I can't obviously like project her into like the character that she wrote. But still, I'm not like reading it. When I first read about Athena's character, like my initial thought was, oh, that's like R.F. Kuang. But as I read about Athena, I'm not like thinking, oh, this is literally R.F. Kuang. I'm not like continuously associating her with R.F. Kuang. I get that might be like the case with some people, because I've seen online people do that. But for me personally, I just made the association, and I was like, oh, that kind of reminds me of R.F. Kuang. And then like it just like left my mind. And also about Juniper, I don't like her, and I think that's coloring a lot of my like reading experience, because I read some time ago that she went through like this one breakdown a week after like Athena had died or something, and even though she was not close, she had this like very like painful experience, and she called up her therapist or something, and I was like, wait, is she faking it? And I felt really bad about it, because I mean obviously she's a morally grey character, and I have really complex feelings about her in general. But yeah, also one thing was that she picks up the last draft that Athena had, and it's about Chinese history, and I was like, wait, isn't that like not appropriate for her to like talk about? But then I was also like, isn't R.F. Kuang also writing from the point of a white writer? So I don't know, I just have
There's
like
lots of complexity.
Yeah, it's I have a lot of complex thoughts about it, and I still haven't finished reading it, but from all the spoilers, I guess she doesn't really I don't think my perspective of her will change that much, but
there's no redemption arc.
Yeah, but then I feel like I will obviously feel sympathy for her, like in the things that Devi mentioned.
She is the protagonist.
Yeah, she is the
all.
protagonist, like a tragic hero. I want my editor to like me. I want her to think I'm easy to work with, that I'm not a stubborn diva, that I'm capable of making any changes she asks for. It'll make her more likely to sign me on for future projects. It's not all about pandering to authority. I do think we've made the book better, more accessible, more streamlined. The original draft made you feel dumb, alienated at times, and frustrated with the self-righteousness of it all. It stank of all the most annoying things about Athena. The new version is a universally relatable story, a story that anyone can see themselves in.
Does the teller change the story? It's a long-standing literary debate. I think all of us here hosting this episode today, I don't expect the listeners to do this because honestly, not the most important thing to discuss about, but all of us here have certainly encountered this debate in class of when you're encountering a story, does it matter who is telling that story? And this book seems to make an argument about this issue, specifically in reference to representation within the modern literary world and publishing, right? My question is, how well do you think Yellowface and Kuang makes their argument about, is it okay for a white author to contribute to non-white, or specifically here Chinese history and talking about the inheritance of what it means to be Chinese? Devi?
Right at the beginning of this episode, Sam had brought up a piece called In Defense of Fiction by Zadie Smith, which we did last semester as part of our English course. We will link it in the description. It's a wonderful reflective essay on fiction, and you guys should definitely check it out.
It's really interesting to read.
Yeah.
Like it is a bit wordy, but it's not like a wall of text. It's very engaging.
It's not, you wouldn't like look at it as like literary criticism. Oh my god, this is some old research paper someone wrote and you have to like read it. No, it's just a very nice contemplative essay on what qualifies as fiction and what kind of fiction is considered to be correct and right. And I think this connects, Sam told me about this. She was like, this reminded me of In Defense of Fiction. I was like, yeah, I was thinking of that while I was reading. So Smith, who's herself Jamaican English, in the essay she says, I once wrote a novel about an imaginary multi-hyphenated British Jewish Chinese boy. It was love and interest that motivated me, but my love and interest was located in the other. In my case, love of and interest in Judaism and Buddhism, two systems of thought in which I have no birthright. But also deep curiosity about this imagined person, Alex Lee, whose voice I had in my head. So here's the disconnect that comes in with what Zadie Smith says and what was the motivating factor for Juniper. In her case, it was jealousy. It was she had no interest in Chinese history. She just researched. She did a surface level research, and like you kind of it's not explicitly told that she did not do any research, but you just know that she did no research because she talks about
she read the research that Athena had done.
And she considered it her own research because she kept asking. She had a paragraph asking about why do these Chinese people have like A in front of their names? Is that their first name? Do all Chinese people have but even for me, who has like no research interest in Chinese history, like it's kind of a known fact that using A, or rather like A in front of the name, is a way of showing affection. And it's just, when she says that she has researched, you kind of know the level of research she has gone into. But on the question of morality, like whether it is right, I always feel like, it's reading as an activity is very cognitively centered. And this is my personal opinion, okay? I feel like reading is a subjective activity. Now, there may be...
what you mean by cognitively centered?
Okay. I think there's a later question you have where I will elaborate on this. But when you're reading something, I know Angel just said that I have no thoughts while reading, but you do have some unconscious thoughts. And like, if you think about that book later,
Some cognitive, some
There's
unconscious processing of what
there's
you're
some
what's
processing of what you're reading, and I believe that the reader has much more freedom than the author themselves in interpreting and analyzing and deriving meaning from the book. Even if Juniper had written this entirely like well researched treatise on Chinese history, you cannot control what the reader derives and what the reader interprets. Intentional fallacy, Wimsatt and Beardsley, please look it up if you're interested. But I think you can't control the response of the readers either. And in Juniper's case, she had this huge backlash over Twitter when Asian critics like pointed out the very white-centric view of her, and the way she completely, painted over Chinese history and the intricacies. And that's the thing, in the response we give to the author, there's always this like social perception of what is right and what isn't. And though that may be dangerous at times, I feel like we have the freedom and we have the ability to discern what can be considered correct representation and what cannot.
I feel like Yellowface specifically, it falls in this issue of, we talk about representation in terms of the kind of writers that gets published, but also representation in the kind of characters that get published, the kind of protagonists that we get to see. And I think a lot of what can be observed in the book is that one need not necessarily be the other. You can have some of what I'm about to say is very surface level. You can have good kind of representative characters that were not made by people from that community with that birthright. I think we were talking about in between takes we were talking about Rick Riordan, and the way that he incorporates Greek literature into his writing, and also
that some of his major characters
yeah
are so diverse and
also neurodivergence into his writing, though that is attributed to his son having ADHD, but kind of ways in which we can interact and contribute to discussions that are beyond our own direct experiences. At the same time, I think it's not about the meaning is not contained to the story. There's the extract that we had read out just now, where it says, I do think we've made the book better, more accessible, more streamlined, and kind of the question becomes accessible to whom? Because you're always writing, I think, inevitably in a voice that makes you feel understood. And a kind of being a speaker of Indian English who has, I don't ever feel like the language that comes naturally to me would ever be understood in a literary sense, in an essay, in this or that, because I never see writing that sounds like the way I speak. And there are all of these intricacies that we see Juniper being in Yellowface being just blatantly unaware of. Yeah. She doesn't know that she needs to look in that direction. About the thing we were talking about, research, where Athena's research is not just reading all of these records and papers. It's about thinking, is this relevant to my book? Is this relevant to the arguments I'm trying to make about what it means to be Chinese? I mean, obviously this is me projecting, but research is about considering the kind of arguments that you can incorporate together. It's not about reading research papers. It's about thinking what they mean and how they contribute to the world. And if you're not part of that community, or if you're not even, at the very least, listening to people from those actual communities, then you miss out on what actually means something to them. And I think you can't say like, oh, white person can't write about non-white person. But I think the demand is more of, we should try to listen to each other more, especially when something that doesn't immediately make sense to us is being discussed. Sam?
Okay, yeah. So, apart from this, what I was thinking while reading this and the In Defense of Fiction was like, they are talking about writing, they're talking about stories, but I didn't like In Defense of Fiction, it didn't talk about like actually publishing and selling the thing, because when we write books, like basically, there is a focus on it selling, people buying, making profit, marketing, everything, right? And that I was thinking, what happens to that when you are talking about representation and talking about who is telling the story, and all. I was thinking, how does that affect?
The debate largely exists on this theoretical thing that it kind of can ignore the practical realities. You can push authors of colors, queer authors and all of this, but unless you can create a market for it, how is it going to become a realistic job for them to pursue? And are you actually disadvantaging this person by not creating the space for them to thrive in this industry? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question.
Yeah. And also, while writing stories, they tend to pander to what is going to sell rather than what they want to write. Right. So yeah, I was just thinking about how it actually affects
kind of
people.
Reminds me of RRR. That there's this interview that S.S. Rajamouli did with the New Yorker, where he was like, my job as a filmmaker is to entertain the audience, and I'm writing to the audience, and then it's my opinion that he's dumb. It's my opinion that his responses in this interview was very dumb and very entertaining. But he was talking about how it's my obligation to entertain the audience, and then kind of dismissing that a lot of his audience happens to be Hindutva and Hindu nationalists, and kind of, there's this tension between obligation and what makes money, and the social influences behind that.
What I would like is for her to burn them, to scatter the ashes along with Athena's, so that no curious relative decades from now can go poking through them to dredge up what should be left alone. But I have to make her think she came up with that idea herself. There's no one else. Mrs. Liu shakes her head again. No, after her father went back to China, it was me and Athena, just the two of us. She sniffles. That's why I said yes to the Marlin people, you see. They would at least take it off my hands. I just wouldn't trust a public archive, I say. You don't know what they'll uncover. Mrs. Liu's eyes widen. Suddenly, she seems greatly disturbed, and I wonder what she's thinking about. But I know it's best not to pry. I've already gotten what I came for. I'll let her imagination do the rest.
The recording got deleted. So, Yellowface takes place. A lot of the story and the narrative takes place between a Chinese American author and a white American author, and like mentioned in the previous questions. And I was very curious about whether or not some moments in the story open up to us on different lines, whether it's about being South Asian or female or a queer reader or any number of other social issues not directly represented or explicitly discussed in the novel.
Actually, a bit of context for what I'm about to say. Sami, I keep calling her an NRI, but she is an RI.
I'm an RI. I lived here. I lived here.
But the thing is, she has an American citizenship, having lived there for till she was 2. So, for like some of her formative years, she has lived in America. And I just wanted to hear your response to this question. You know, considering that you might have had a different experience with being South Asian, having lived in America for 2 years since birth, and how that has affected your own perception of your own South Asianness and Indianness, and how it relates to this question.
Actually, I mean, like I said, this recording got deleted, and the second time around, that question is a lot deeper. So I will actually maybe come up with a more meaningful response this time. So I think, I don't personally, because I have no recollection of the United States. The few ways that I feel like it does influence me is, number one, in accent and the way that I speak. I came here and I had an American accent, and the teachers loved it, and then it reinforced to me that sounding North Indian is good. And speaking in a non-Indian way is good. But that gets reinforced to any Indian person, honestly. Yeah. It's just that I had some scaffolding. It's easier for me to not sound Indian because I had that influence early on. And also kind of, maybe it's less about me having lived in US and more about my parents having lived there for a long time. A lot of the values that they hold and kind of their ideas of snack foods, and like they'll buy maple syrup and I don't know, make pancakes now and then. And my mom loves baking because she used to go to like baking classes there and scrapbooking and things that are not immediately widespread in India but were extremely widespread in US, that they definitely have. That makes people maybe perceive my family as being more American just because those things aren't immediately registered as Indianable. But by the way, there is going to be a blog post written by me on our university website about me not feeling Kannadiga enough and about language. Maybe when it's out, we will tweet about it. If it's out before the episode comes, then it'll be linked in the description.
Somebody won a prize for that. Did you get the money?
No, I didn't get the money.
What?
Because you had to register it before the year ended and I was really busy. I don't know.
Okay.
But please look forward to that. It will also be linked in our card when it comes out. I've been speaking for a while, but that is not the point I wanted to bring up in this for this question at all. I wanted to talk about what it's like to be queer. I scripted this episode, so it is my choice that I put the extract that I wanted to reference right before the question, because I can occupy that authorial influence. But I think it's mentioned very early on. June kind of fleetingly mentions that Athena is, I think it's like ambiguously queer or something like that, along those lines.
Yeah, she does.
And then there is this moment where she says, June says to Athena's mom and says, I just wouldn't trust a public archive. You don't know what they'll uncover. And that moment was very terrifying to me. Not in the sense of, okay, they'll uncover something horrible about Athena's past, but just if that had to Mrs. Liu some implication of Athena being queer is going to be revealed to the world, and then suddenly your dead daughter, your honored daughter, becomes a queer woman. Is that related to some kind of aversion to queerness? Is that what Mrs. Liu is like worried of? Because I tend to have those same fears, that to be publicly queer, to be explicitly and have my labels out there and speak about these issues in a way that may or may not tokenize me in the eyes of the public, if people even pay attention. But that aside, that my family or parents or the people around me who I love will see that as a sullying of my image rather than some complexity or some development to it. some integral part of me of value. I think that it's not necessary that moment was about queerness. It might have been about depression. It might have been about mental health issues. It might have just been of not wanting someone's personal lives, whether that's their like partners or sex lives or any of that, even if it is straight, to be out there. Well, possible. But I specifically read that moment in a queer light. There are other moments that reveal to me about that are just very telling for me as an Indian reader. There was a moment where she was like complaining about how reading some book or watching some movie and complaining about how all of the characters are so hung up on family acceptance or family issues. And I was like, that's our country, that's how we are. We're a collectivist society. Like, not everyone is individualist, not everyone is following their perfect romance. A lot of our society is built on us caring about what our family thinks. And other moments where it's she spoke about how Juniper expresses her opinion that the Chinese were in World War II, that she writes about, that Athena wrote about in the novel, were not indentured, and that they willingly went to pursue better opportunities. And that's a narrative that we hear all the time, especially because there were indentured laborers from India as well. And sure, maybe those opportunities were better, but there's this denial and ignorance of colonial influence. There's another moment where she's talking about it's a sweeping statement to say that nobody converted to Christianity willingly and knowingly, which dismisses the idea that conversion can be a tool to take advantage of existing disparities. In India specifically, how conversion, it helped lots of people escape from caste violence. It helped lots of people escape from poverty and have communities that love and respect them. At the same time, it was a means of culturally taking over. And that's a complex relationship to colonialism that if you have not been colonized, you will never be able to. I mean, it will be very hard for you to grasp that there are good things and bad things, and you feel deeply about all of them. Devi?
Sammy, I think, touched on all the points. But Sam, right after I finished the book, Sam sent a really interesting video criticizing the book. And it's by this... do you want to talk a bit about it, Sam? Or like...
It's by a YouTuber called Cindy. She puts up a lot of book. She's really popular in book.
I love her.
BookTube, which is like book YouTube. Like how there's Bookstagram and book-tok. Yeah. I mean, her videos are at the same time, they're really very interesting, but also very funny. She's really funny, and
this was the first video I've seen of hers, and she was like so cool and charming, and everything she said made sense.
I'm obsessed with her. She's a very critical YouTuber. Like, she's very good at shitting on things. But she's evidence.
She has evidence on it.
And she also plays like the devil's judge. She gives a point, but she also backtracks on that point and makes another point.
So Sam had shared a critique by this YouTuber to me. We will link the video in the description. And I think one of the points she had brought up was this idea of privilege, Athena Liu is Chinese, but she's Chinese American, and that American to me holds a lot of weight in terms of opportunities, of money that she's exposed to, because Athena Liu, compared to Juniper, class-wise.
I don't know if it has specifically to do with her being American, but she is from a background of money and privilege.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily link that to being American, but she is rich.
Yeah.
She is upper class.
Yeah, that's she was in the video. She talks about like the intersectionality of how like there's a blind spot in this book of the class.
Yeah, but to me specifically, okay, as an Indian South Asian queer woman living in a country where I feel like I'm going to end up being homeless ultimately, being American holds this kind of, power. Rather, I'm not saying that, oh my god, wow, America, land of dreams, but it is the land of dreams.
There's a cultural influence.
Yeah.
And when you think about being a writer and publishing books, most of the famous books are from America.
American authors, even if they're non-white. An American.
Yeah, you see,
hyphenated American.
Indian American, Korean American. So there's kind of a distance which we have from
exactly
them.
What I was trying to bring up. Also, there's this one of Athena's kind of questionable methods of writing her books. She used to like visit museums. Once she went with June to a museum, and there I think she interviewed this old Korean man who was wheelchair bound, and she was talking to him and she was writing down everything she was saying, and that went to one of her subsequent stories. And it also like brings up the question, the question of authorship which we were talking about. If you're a hyphenated American, like you belong to a minority community but you're a hyphenated American, how authentic can the experiences you're writing about be for people actually living in these countries?
Oh my god, I should not.
Please tell.
No,
Start it, Sami. I'm done. This is what I had to say. But yes,
This reminded me of like her other book, Poppy War, where one of my friends I met on Discord was talking about how RF Kuang is writing about like them, right? Like people who went through the Poppy War and like that experiences. So my friend, who is like a Southeast Asian, she's like living in Singapore, and like felt like it was really insensitive to her. Like that's her personal feeling. Yeah, it just reminded me of that.
So I'm going to completely tangent. Because so there is this rat race or this cult of authenticity. I think there was a essay about this. I don't know if it was exactly in the same context of what I want to talk about, but it's that there is this constant battle to be the authentic Indian or the authentic South Asian, to embody in language and speech and religion and any possible measure to embody all of that before you have the right to speak. That you need to be Hindu enough, that you need to be upper caste enough, that you need to have all of your family history, you need to be a landowner, you need to have the money, you need to be man enough, you need to know all of this intricate educational information that no one has access to before you're allowed to actually contest or have a debate about anything in India. And there NRI, non-resident Indian, is used like it's a bad word. Like, oh, you're a dumb person. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about.
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah.
Oh my god, you should.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, real life experience of me as an NRI is like, oh, you got to go out of India. That's so cool. That's like,
Yeah. Both of those are there. Like, oh, you're an NRI. Oh my god, you're rich and you're fashionable and you have all of this like cool
American accent.
cool accent, cool food. You bring snacks and I love you, but also like.
yeah. So actually, for me, it's like I'm from Kerala. Most of my family is in Kerala. So most of the NRIs in Kerala, it's not like American NRI. It's like Gulf NRI. So it's not very rich thing. In the Gulf thing, it's not always, oh, you go there and become so rich. There's like you go there like to earn money to send it to the people in Kerala, right?
Even in an American immigrant context, that is also the thing that you're there to earn money and send it back home. But there is this connection between material wealth and NRI status. Okay, and there's also this connection of you don't know what it's like at home and don't speak about it. You don't have a right to represent what's happening at home. But what becomes interesting, and this is an issue and an argument that I've lived my whole life in, but what becomes interesting to me now as an adult is the way that, okay, fine, okay, we're discounting what NRI people are saying, which is wrong, and they do have genuine experiences of South Asianness. But what becomes interesting to me is the way that we discount people in India, and I'm not talking about me, American citizen, I'm talking about along caste lines, along lines that don't neatly fit into religious histories. When we're talking about how conversion plays into Indianness, we're discounting like, oh, you abandoned your heritage or your caste culture and so you cannot speak about it. Like, no, all of this stays with us, and all of it, complexifies and intensifies the Indian experience.
Your personal experience is an experience itself. You can't put down someone's experience, like in any case, just like general, you can't do it.
We cannot. I've given up on trying to define what it means to be Indian, because it's all sullied in complex histories and politics and all of that. But it's just, we're constantly, rather than worried about what conversations we're having, we're worried about who is in the conversation. And that stops us from actually thinking about things in new ways, in actually imagining worlds that are new, because we're so stuck up in who gets to speak or not, that we stop speaking at all. And so I think what I'm getting at is, we talk a lot about hyphenated minority or marginalized American or racialized American, but there are hyphenated and marginalized communities here in India as well. And it's, obviously American audiences have more money. It's where publishing can often be actually a career, versus here where it's not going to bring you as much in terms of livelihood comparatively. But the global audience exists here as well. India is a giant country of English speakers, and if you're writing in English, then your audience exists here as well. And there are people here as well that aren't worried about American hyphenation, that are worried about their Indian hyphenations. And I think those are issues that are just as important.
I will craft and sell a story about how the pressures of publishing have made it impossible for white and non-white authors alike to succeed. About how Athena's success was entirely manufactured, how she was only ever a token. About how my hoax, because let's frame it as a hoax, not a theft, was really a way to expose the rotten foundations of this entire industry. About how I am the hero in the end.
Okay, so kind of to wrap up the discussion, do you have any final impressions about Yellowface? In my reading, I personally felt like a lot changed about my thoughts after engaging with online discourse and fandom. While I was reading the book, it was because honestly, Kuang's writing style is so compelling. It's the kind of book that you just get absorbed in, and that just absorbs you into its world and story. But coming out of it, even just as I was moving away from the book and just letting the thoughts simmer and kind of develop and marinate, I could feel a lot of my thoughts changing very quickly. I don't know, Abhi, if you have finished reading Yellowface, but Abhi was halfway through the book, and I was like, it's okay, come record anyways, because I feel like that when you're still in the book halfway, a lot of things are different. So does anyone have any thoughts? Abhi?
It's just, when I first picked up the book, it was a little bit difficult to put it down, but I'm still halfway through. I don't know if I will finish reading this because we have midsems, but I probably will later sometime in this year. But I got a lot of spoilers, so honestly I don't see the point. I will finish it. No, I will finish it. But I will finish it. Yeah, but I like it so far. I like the characters, not Juniper, but I like how she's made the characters and stuff. It's really good. Devi.
Unlike Abhi, who's taking her time reading the entire thing.
Are you shading me?
I know, I love you. Why would I do that? I'm referencing you. I'm just like building comparisons and contrasts.
Okay.
Yeah, and very much unlike Abhi. I finished the book in one sitting.
Yeah.
It took me around 2 hours. I don't even know how I did it. Like the PDF I was reading said it had 200 pages. I was like, oh yeah, that's small enough.
It was like you had an assignment to
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had 2 huge like tasks to complete that day, and I started at like around 12 and I finished it by 2:30. And when I finished, I tried to get up and I fell down almost because my knees were shaky, face sweaty, arms trembling. But the thing is, the ending did not stick with me. So for context, should I spoil the ending of the book? Yeah, so there's this woman, Candice, okay, and she kind of has been Abhi, I know what you're gonna say, shut up. And she's kind of been in the background of this book throughout. She was the first person on the editorial team who suggested that they should get a sensitivity reader for the book, and then she was, vehemently shut down, and then she was also fired, I think, after she did something, and June complained about her to her really like racist white head of the editors. Darlene, what was her name? Something with D, yeah. And she turns out to be like the final big villain in June's life in the end. And she gets a recording exposing June, but her motivation is that she does not care about Athena. She just wants to expose June and write her own book. And it carries the implication that the same cycle of, gaining fame through someone else's story and then experiencing a downfall through that will eventually occur to her. And it was like, I don't really remember the ending, it's June kind of contemplating, and her thoughts are just like, it's like a stream of consciousness, and by that time my brain had like dissolved. So I was dissolving there with her. But it was a great book, but I don't remember the ending, I'll say that much. Angel?
To me, I feel like I was in a reading slump for a really long time. And this is a kind of book that will take you out of a reading slump, because it's fast paced, but it's also good writing, and it's also like mysterious, and it just has those kind of elements that take you out of a reading slump. And in that way, it did a great job, because as soon as I was done with Yellowface, I picked up another book. And now I'm like reading 3 different books at the same time.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you guys. Guys, only Sammi is clapping for me. Anyways.
I will give you a report card that says Angel is a voracious
Thank you.
Maybe she'll even get an A+ from you.
reader for
Will
reading.
you A+? Only A+?
No, you will get an O from me.
I love you. Okay. Yeah, so it's a thumbs down. Yeah, it's a kind of book that, if you've been in a reading slump for a long time, it's a kind of book that would take you out of the reading slump. And I think Yellowface is one of the fastest book I've read, which took me 3 days actually. I can't read like Devi, sit and read in like 2.5 hours.
I usually don't read like this. It's just something about Yellowface like kept me, and also my procrastination. Yeah. So yeah.
It took me about 3 days because I wanted to enjoy the book, right? And not just read it for the episode, but also enjoy the book. So I really, really liked the book. A lot of y'all hate Juniper. I have nothing to say about her. I don't know where I stand. Right? I don't know. I feel empathy, but I also know that she's done something wrong, but also I feel empathy for her. So yeah.
It reminds me of that quote from Ender's Game, but it might not be from Ender's Game, but it's like when you understand someone enough, you can't help but love them.
Yeah, I for some reason I don't like her, but I also don't hate her. But I have this.
For her.
I care for her, And I was like, when the book ended, right? I was like, and then I saw the acknowledgement part. I was like, that's it. That's all? That's where they're ending the book? No way. No way they're ending the book there. So I wanted more. But I also felt like it was smart to finish the book there. Because let's just say the book continues with Juniper writing another book. And it's just the same cycle repeating again and again. So I think that would have bored out. Now it's almost like a cliffhanger that, keeps you thinking that what could have happened. It leaves to the audience to kind of figure out what's happening. Probably Juniper wrote another book, or maybe not. Maybe her career is ruined forever. Maybe she could be able to come back, right? In that way, I really, really like the book. And thank you, Sam, for introducing us that book. I really, really enjoyed it. It took me out of reading slump.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sam, do you have anything to say?
Well, I mean, even though I'm the one who told you guys about this book, I didn't love it or anything, but it just made me think a lot, like the cycle thing you said. I was like, is this cycle still being repeated in real life right now? Like the published people still keep publishing stories about
Reminds me of Colleen Hoover for some reason.
Yeah,
I mean, she didn't plagiarize anything of sorts, but the kind of thing reminds me of.
Yeah, it's very meta, There's so many. It's still happening. So I was really confused. It's where do I stand in this thing in real life as a consumer of published books? I mean, I don't buy many because I pirate. Yeah, so I was like, how can I enter this industry as an English literature student? It's you think, how will you stand in that? Yeah, and especially in the context Indian publishing context where is does it even, I'm always does it even exist?
Indian publishing context, I mean, if all of your readers are pirating your book as opposed to paying you money, I mean, I guess it's not going to exist. I'm sorry. And maybe, girl, you are kind of the problem, and maybe I am also part of the problem.
I mean, I don't feel it right to put R.F. Kuang and Colleen Hoover on the same conversation.
Yeah, people are. I mean, I'm sorry. Maybe I cut you off, but some people are receiving enough money. Pirate J.K. Rowling. What do you think?
Yeah, it doesn't feel right to put R.F. Kuang and Colleen Hoover on the same discussion, but the book kind of reminded me of how media crucifies you for everything, right? Especially if you're a writer, right? And Colleen Hoover is still being crucified for her books. I think that this thing kind of reminded me of that as well. How Sami was saying, online discussion and how fandom works within the writing community as such. Yeah, I think.
I guess for the total feeling I got when I finished reading the book is that it was just haunting. I was just haunted for a while. I mean, the feeling passed later, but for a minute I was like, man,
wow, what happened?
Oh yeah, what is this? Yeah, so it was really haunting. Yeah.
But then I also had this feeling, that the villain would be someone that we would not expect. I really, in the back of my mind, I had Candace. Although she wasn't there at all throughout the whole story, except for towards the beginning, in the middle or something. Yeah.
I really wanted the ghost to be real.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
And then the writer really made us feel that it was Athena. It's probably, I was like, is Athena alive? No way Athena's alive. Sami.
Yeah, no, I mean, by the time I reached the chapter where she's going to a coffee shop or somewhere and then she's seeing Athena there, I was ready to be okay, she has depression and hallucinations, and I was really ready for it to go down psychiatry lane, but then it was not. I mean, it was kind of hallucination where she was mistaking people for being Athena and they were really just Asian people watching her. And wearing their own normal clothes and not trying to imitate Athena at all. It was kind of hallucinatory in that sense. But kind of the idea of feeling haunted, I think for me it was that question of how does it end? Because I mean, the book, I mean, I'm not in the publishing industry, but it is kind of I won't say exaggerated, but it's written in this very dramatic and dynamic kind of like progression, where it's like thing happening and again and again and again, and then which kind of drives up the tension and kind of also that binary divide between white woman writer and like Asian writer in a very binary way. And so I think that haunting question for me was like, when does it end? Because even though it is very kind of simplified, the narrative is kind of flattened representation of what probably really goes on. It's certainly true that it does go on. Like lots of women of color writers get their work stolen, especially in English language. I mean, we're mostly talking about English language publishing on a global scale. And it's just the haunting question is, how does it end? When does it end? Does it end at all? Because you read the whole book, and Juniper always has some retaliation, and it is always going to work with maybe 70% accuracy, versus Candace has lost her job. I loved Candace's character. She was there for 2 seconds in the start of the book, and I was like, I love her because she's afraid. She realizes that Juniper has this influence and can create harm even when Juniper is not some big writer already. Like, she identifies that and she has the courage to speak up about it. And man, I loved Candace's character, even though she was there for like 30 seconds. Maybe it's just me projecting that I want to be like her. Also, like, it was really messed up that she lost her job, that she lost everything there. It was a really well-motivated character. Now, as I say this, Angel, do you have something to add on?
I was thinking about what you were saying. It was haunting in a way that, coming back to the first discussion we had, how people started, inserting R.F. Kuang as Athena, right? And it's haunting in a way that R.F. Kuang is in this writing industry, in this publishing industry, and the book is about that, right? So it scares me personally.
That people are experiencing this.
That there's nothing that we can or people can do about it, because it is what it is, right? And so I think it was haunting in that way as well.
Yeah. And what was I getting to? This reminds me of one of the things that I think Cindy had brought up in her video about how there's this plot hole, which is that Juniper gets the big writing deal based on the fact that the book is really, really great. But if she was already that good of a writer, then why didn't her first book do well? Because she's still a white writer and she's still all of that. And so suddenly this one book would not get published and in such a big way just because it's a good book. If her politics are right, that it's like, okay, you need to be an author of color and you need to be about these issues. But where was I going with this? Yeah, I think it's a book that's compelling. I really want to applaud Kuang's writing style, but also in that same way that supposedly I'm assuming Juniper's book maybe did really well because it's talking about within the world of the book, it did well because it's talking about this issue of like Chinese indentured soldiers. I think maybe Yellowface does something because just society is really ready to talk about racism. I mean they're not really ready to talk about racism, but certain parts are just really ready to talk about it. And irrespective of how flattening or uncomplex what is being spoken is, Yellowface is a book that's filled with caricatures and stereotypes. And it flattens a lot of the issues of these communities. But because people are so ready to talk about racism, because it speaks about it in such a simple and uncomplicated way, I think it becomes a compelling book to read, for better or for worse as well. Yeah. But I still enjoyed reading it. It was really fun.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. This episode featured Devi, Sami, Abhi, Angel and Sam. Scripting by Sami and audio editing by me, Devi. Don't forget to follow us at wrw.podcast on Instagram and wrw_podcast on Twitter. You can write to us at womenarewomen22@gmail.com. We also have a blog, which is linked in the show notes, along with everything mentioned in this episode. Happy listening! Bye! Cue outro music.